Okay, kids, it's time for another episode of the Fueled by Weird podcast, the only podcast where we don't need the Konami code to unlock a great conversation. I'm Chris Dailey, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with the hosts of the brand new podcast, Character Select, Anjali Bhimani and Julia Bianco. Ladies, how are you doing today?
Hi, we're great, I think. How you
Yeah,
doing, Julia?
I'm
I'm
doing
doing
great.
good.
I'm happy to be here.
I'm glad you guys are here. I'm very excited to meet you guys. So, usually I like to start these things off with an icebreaker question. So, today's question, if you were a flavor of ice cream, which one would you be?
I mean, my instinct immediately go for my two favorites, which would be mint chocolate chip or coffee.
Ooh,
But those are my favorites, so I don't know if they count.
absolutely.
Probably coffee. I am probably coffee because I'm probably 100% coffee. My blood is probably 99% coffee.
I was gonna say, as a friend, I would
Yeah,
I would say coffee too,
coffee,
just because of
coffee,
the
high energy.
energy level.
That's awesome.
Fresh.
I probably have one of those like a rocky road or some kind of something with a
Okay.
swirl in it. So,
Okay.
something that's got a mixture of a bunch of different stuff.
There you go.
Kind of an enigma.
There you go. That's
I
awesome.
like Rocky Road for you because it's sweet, it's a little bit nutty. It's like it's fun because it's got the marshmallows. I like it.
Very cool. I think I have to, kind of go along the same lines as you, Anjali. Mint chocolate chip is my favorite, so I think you'd have to go with that.
It's so refreshing.
It's so good.
We
So,
just
so good.
had
Very cool.
last night.
All right. So, with the concept of the show Fueled by Weird, I like to kind of dig in and see the things that make people who they are, what they like to do when they're not working, because all the things you're interested in and things you do for hobbies and stuff, that's, what fuels who you are and essentially what fuels your weird. So, Julia, let's start with you. What are some things that you like to do?
Outside of, I work a lot.
Okay, I can
But I
understand
also
that.
have an 8-year-old, and so I like to do a lot of things with her. I love singing karaoke. That's one of my favorite things to do outside. I like to do a little bit of like art stuff, but nothing that anybody will ever see. It's very private, like just for mental stimulation.
Sure.
And I love traveling and kind of eating in every place in the world and trying all sorts of different foods. I'd say those are the main things. And music, I guess, going to see a lot of live music if possible.
Very cool. I have my youngest is an 8-year-old, so I definitely can understand the run around with that for sure. All right, Anjali, what do you like to do?
Um, so this is tricky because
Okay.
my life very much by design it involves me getting to do a bunch of things I love with friends and somehow turning it into work.
That's awesome.
So, um, uh, outside of work, which means I don't do these things very often. I do love hiking, but I haven't done it in far too long, and rock climbing, which I haven't done in far too long, really far too long. But I love spending time with my dog and my husband and just watching random stuff that we're not watching for research. Because more often than not, I'm watching something because I'm watching it for the audition or I'm watching it for the, learning about it. But just silly, fun, guilty pleasures that turn into awesome pleasures. I too love traveling and eating, which is one of the reasons we travel so well together, Julia and I. I just love meeting people, like uh, uh, just having random conversations with people that you wouldn't naturally be in a conversation necessarily with.
Yeah,
Um, I have a tendency to strike up very long, full conversations with complete strangers just because it feels right.
sure.
Uh, which might be a function of my personality, but also might be a function of doing a lot of conventions and enjoying doing that so much. Because when I do conventions, I prefer to ask the people who come to meet me about themselves. I want to hear what are they into, what excites them, what lights them up.
Yeah.
Because the second you talk to someone about what lights them up, you see them light up.
Yeah. That's awesome. And that's kind of one of the whole reason I started the show because, when I start a new show or a new book series or something like that, I like to kind of dig in. Sometimes I'll spoil it for myself. I just like to know, how it started, how it was inspired, where it came from, all that kind of stuff. So I'm totally the same way. I like to kind of dig in and see what makes a person tick, what they're into, their likes, their dislikes, just to kind of see how they got to where they are now.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
also
very
because
cool.
we tend to, whether we mean to or not, we tend to have a limited experience if we're only talking to the people either in our own social circle or in our own work circle.
Yeah.
And when you're talking with people who are doing things that are completely wildly different or living completely different experiences from you, it's the perspective that you get from it and realizing how small, I shouldn't say small, but like there's so many people in the world and so many amazing experiences and vantage points and viewpoints, which is part of why we ended up doing this podcast.
Yeah,
There's so many viewpoints that we don't even necessarily know about, let alone think of.
for sure.
And getting to expose ourselves to those is really fun.
Very
This is
cool.
definitely like goes right into the
Yeah.
doing it for fun thing. I mean, as much as it's work related, if you will, for the two of us, the podcast is 100% like hobby fun,
Yeah.
getting to start something like this. So
Yeah. It
That's
definitely came out of a love, not just of a love of games, but a love of this community and a love of the people who make them and a love of the people who play them. And each other, because now we get to spend extra time together and call it quote unquote work, even though it's such a fun time.
there you go. I know when I started my first podcast, that was kind of the whole reason to do it. And I've heard a few other people do it the same way, where they start the podcast because it gives them an excuse to hang out with their friends or give them an excuse to talk to them once a week. And it gives you a scheduled time where you know for sure, hey, I'm going to talk to this person and I'm excited about it. So that's very cool. Very
And
cool.
getting to talk to people about something that lights them up that they might not always get to talk about.
Yes. Yes, for sure. All right. So I kind of want to move next to, how did you guys end up meeting in the first place?
Remember our first time meeting, but it was definitely through like auditions and gaming.
exactly, yeah.
Basically, we both work in games, and I'm an actress, and she's a casting director, and she also is like the great connector. She's like the queen of connectors in this industry. Like it's unbelievable how many people she knows and how excited she gets to introduce cool people to cool people. So I think we probably got closer when we had both written a book in 2022. God, what is time? In 2022, and Julia hit me up and said, hey, let's do some book events together, which sounded great. And then we started spending more time together, and we did a fun piece that she put together for the LA Times about motion capture. And then we became friends.
Yeah, and I think through all of that, we found that we really connected, just a lot of, it's a very easy conversation, and a lot of similarities and a lot of similar friends. And, both of us share a mutual friend with Jennifer Hale, which is to be Jen's friend is quite a lucky thing too. So to have the
Yeah,
three of us have a little super
it's a
group,
fun little trio.
yeah, has been really, really cool. But yeah, just throughout the industry, one of the things that I've always admired about Anjali, and I'm so excited to have her uh, doing this podcast with me, and me doing it with her, is because of how well-rounded she is in all of the different acting kind of mediums. And she's been in TV, she's been in games, she's been in podcasts and theater and film and all of the things. And I'm such an advocate uh, for actors being actors, and that being the number one thing, and the media coming out on being the secondary thing. And she's always had a wonderful reverence for games and game performances, and that was evident in all of her auditions early on. And so it was just kind of a natural, on the book tours stuff, we just very naturally conversed, and that planted a seed, but it wasn't how the podcast idea got started.
Exactly. So the podcast idea came out of another conversation that we did not both know that we were going to be on together. So a few years ago, again, we were asked to be on the BAFTA committee for selecting, like narrowing down the long list of nominees for best supporting performance in a game. And so we got on this call at 6 o'clock in the morning because it was UK time. So we got a call at 6 o'clock in the morning and saw each other. So we got really excited about that. That was the first jolt of extra coffee. And then we proceeded to have this extraordinary conversation with people from all different walks of life and all different aspects of game creation. It wasn't just people who were directly necessarily involved with the acting or the performance. It was animators and sound designers and casting, and people from all different walks talking about their vantage point about what made these performances exceptional through the lens of their expertise. And it was Julia used this word once, and it's the perfect word. It was such a reverent conversation and such a respectful conversation. And I left that conversation feeling hugely validated just as an artist in general, knowing that these conversations were happening. Because usually when you think about awards, you assume that everybody's just kind of voting, and it's kind of not a popularity contest, but it involves marketing and all of these things. But this one was genuinely different kinds of artists coming together and talking through all of what went into those performances. So we hopped off that call and immediately hopped on another call with each other and talked about how amazing that was, and then said, these conversations need to be happening in public. We need to showcase not just the interviews that people have with actors, but the interviews with the people who are behind the scenes creating these characters from the ground up, and what their viewpoints are, and what is important to them, and how they parlay their expertise into the creation of a character. And then the super fun part is, not that that isn't already fun, is we ask them to choose a performance of a character in a game that they believe is exceptional or changed the game or somehow is iconic, and they get to talk about that and why they believe that that is so exceptional. So it's been a wonderful way to not only highlight the work of those people who were interviewed, but for then those people to get to talk about these other performances and those performances to be highlighted. So it's just a giant love fest. Yes. That also is incredibly educational for us as well, certainly for me, because there are things that I'm learning that I didn't even realize go into these things. And it's just loads of fun.
That's awesome. So, speaking of your new podcast, it's for anyone who hasn't heard about it already, it's called Character Select. It's a brand new podcast that just came out a couple of weeks ago. Do you guys, for the people who aren't listening, do you want to kind of give a breakdown as to what the podcast is about?
Sure. Yeah. So Character Select is Anjali and I. We invite someone from the game industry, whether behind the scenes or in front of the camera, if you will. And we talk to them about their journey into games, how they got there. And then we have them select a character performance from a game that they find to be inspiring. And we deep dive into that performance and what makes them love it, what made the world love it, what was going on at the time, where it lands in kind of video game history. And because of the different people involved, we end up having some really intimate knowledge of the process that goes into the creation of some of these characters because of who we're speaking to. For example, talking to Michael Chu about Symmetra from Overwatch, who happens to be played by our very own Anjali.
I didn't choose it. He did.
No, he chose it.
I specifically told him, I was like, you really don't have to choose that character. Okay?
But I'm so glad he did, because when else, especially a game of the past, it's not a marketing conversation.
Yeah.
We're able to have this discussion and talk about things that have never before been talked about by two people who worked on the same project from two very different perspectives, but also together. And so it's invaluable, in my opinion, especially as someone in game development, to have these conversations happening in a place that people can hear them, and actors and people interested in the industry alike.
Yeah, it's very fun to know that there are people out there who may not even know some of these jobs exist, and for them to realize there is a pathway into them if they just love games and they want to work in games, but they have a certain set of skills and they don't know what job applies them. We are hoping that some of these conversations will help them realize there's absolutely a path for you. And so many of the people that we interviewed did not remotely start in games. Like, that was not what they thought they were going to do. And then they kind of not fell into it, but it meshed. It ended up being a thing that made sense. And once that happened, they just took off. So that's been really fun too, is it's a constant reminder that you don't have to know if you're on the right path. You just have to keep moving forward and trust that you are going to find it if you follow your joy and you follow your skill set and you follow the things that light you up.
Very true. I mean, and it's a great show. I've just started watching it recently. I'm still in the middle of the Matt Mercer episode, which is a fantastic episode. He's such a cool
Yeah,
guy.
yeah.
And I really like the concept of the show because, using Matt as example, he's probably had hundreds of interviews where people just want to talk to him about D&D and they want to talk about Critical Role and all of that stuff,
Mhm.
but they probably don't ever give him a chance to talk about Metal Gear. So it's really nice that you guys kind of hone in on something specific and give him a chance to talk about something that he doesn't probably normally ever get to talk about.
And even, he's done a lot of interviews, obviously, about his voice acting career.
Yeah, sure.
But when you talk to Matt about games in general, you realize that Matt has been a gamer in his blood since he was a child.
Oh,
And
for
so he
sure.
has such an in-depth knowledge and love of games and love of these characters. And one of our favorite moments since the launch has been when David Hayter, who plays Solid Snake in Metal Gear Solid, when he got to hear what Matt said, and he sent us a message to convey to Matt how much that meant to him coming from him. Now we have this moment where people are getting to hear things from their peers that they don't necessarily get to hear.
Yeah.
And those peers are getting a chance to, because I don't know about, I mean, I know Julia is very much this way. I was going to say, I don't know about you, but I totally know about you. Like, we love talking about how awesome the people we know in this industry are. We love talking about other people's work and highlighting it, because it's not only inspirational, it is a constant reminder that the bar is high and we can all meet it and exceed it if we're working together.
Very true.
It's not competition, it's just a constant raising of the bar.
Absolutely. Now, are there any guests coming up soon that you guys want to talk about? Just to kind of give people an idea of what's coming.
Oh, we have so many that are exciting, and I'm like, we have a few that are in the trailer, so they're not spoilers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because we were just talking about it, Austin Wintory is one of our upcoming guests, and
cool.
he did say kind of what you were talking about, the subject matter. He said he's talked about kind of the game that he selected and the characters that he selected. He's talked about the music for the game, but he's never been asked about the character performances. And we found that really interesting because he's been interviewed and on podcasts hundreds and hundreds of times. And I think it's exactly what you're saying. We're asking different questions. We're getting to a different side of these people, and we're getting to see their joy in consuming other media, which is just so delightful.
And also, maybe I'm hoping it highlights for them themselves how much their work, whether it seems like it is connected or not, but how much their work affects those character performances. Because those threads are not always tied. People don't always recognize that. It's completely transparent in the game that I did with Austin, where I first met him, which is Stray Gods, the role-playing musical, where he wrote the music for all of us to sing. And it's like 1,000,000 hours of music that we had to record because it's branching songs. And so he molded every single one of those performances as much as any of the actors, if not more. And so that's such a direct way that it affects it that people may not recognize.
Yeah.
And it's so fun to see the smiles. Absolutely. To watch the size of the smiles on our guests' faces when they get to talk about the performances that they love.
That's very cool. Yeah. Now, are there anybody, excuse me, is there anybody that you kind of picture as like a dream guest that you'd like to get on the show?
We've said it, both of us have said it multiple times in interviews recently. So now I'm hoping that this is no longer a dream guest.
Manifesting.
Reality guest. Yeah, manifesting.
Must manifest.
Amy Hennig on. To see, I mean, her viewpoint would just be invaluable to have her on. We have such a long list of people that we want to get on, and people that we know we will be getting on.
Yeah. Besides Amy Hennig, I mean, we've talked a little bit about like Kojima.
Ooh,
Someone like that. That
that would
would
be
be pretty
cool.
cool.
Yeah.
But we also think it's really important to highlight, like she said, many perspectives.
Yeah.
So we're going to be having coming up some art directors, some sound designers, just really trying to. They may not be well known in the main world,
Yeah.
but people who we really want to highlight the
Yeah.
really cool work that they've
And
done.
also people definitely internationally. You know, one of our guests that I have no problem talking about, even though it is, oh, spoiler alert, is a friend of mine whose name is Indrani Ganguly, and she is a game developer in India,
Oh,
and she
cool.
helped work on Venba as well. And I want to bring in some of the people from Venba. But she started her own freaking game studio in India. She was just
Oh,
in
wow.
Vogue India for starting her own game studio. And when I met her a few years ago, she was still kind of finding her way.
Yeah.
But she is doing the thing in a country that is not necessarily as well known, or where games are not necessarily as prevalent as they are here. There's definitely a gaming community, 100%,
For sure.
but they are just not as publicly highlighted. And so for someone as a woman in India too, to be stepping up and creating her own game studio is absolutely extraordinary. And
Yeah.
she is just a force of nature, and I cannot wait to be able to have a conversation with her.
That's very cool. And I really like how you guys are kind of getting a good mix of people who are more well known, like the Matt Mercers and stuff like that, but you're also getting, people that might not be well known just to give them their flowers too. That's very cool.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
again, it's not, oh sorry, it's not just to give them their flowers, it's
Yeah.
to highlight their viewpoint for the
Oh,
audience,
for sure.
or and for us to be able to understand, because there's so much more that goes into things than the front facing people, or
Yeah,
than the
just
well.
yeah, just so
well,
you can kind of see how, when you're playing that specific game, what was going through their mind when they, developed this piece or when they went this direction. That's really cool.
yeah, and I think it's a I lost exactly the way I was going to phrase
Dude, I'm
it.
sorry.
But yeah, I'm excited for people to see the less well known perspectives. And as much as we could put a million really famous actors on the pod, it's very important to us to have that balance. But with
Absolutely.
that, we'll plea that, like, please, share with your friends and like and subscribe so we can get lots of more, because
Yeah.
Yes.
definitely, the popular people have a little more pull, and that's what gets the views out.
Hmm.
But we really do think it's just as important to share the less well known folks.
Absolutely. All right, before I let you guys go, I kind of want to just wrap things up and say, do you guys, either of you guys have a bit of advice you'd like to give to fellow creatives out in the world?
This goes right back to what Julia said about my career in the beginning. The happiest I've ever been is when I am constantly diversifying my creativity. And yes, you can absolutely specialize in things, but there, to be able to give yourself the freedom to create, whether it's different media that you are choosing, or whether it is just different ways you are being creative in your life, that fulfillment is what sustains you through the times when things might not necessarily be as busy or as lucrative or whatever. If you can constantly kind of fuel that fire, constantly stay ignited with some form of creativity, it makes a huge difference when you go in the booth, or when you go into the audition, or when you go into whatever creative field that you are in,
Yeah,
that
definitely.
draw from.
Very cool.
Mine is pretty simple. Don't be a dick.
Yeah.
That's good advice.
It's
That's it.
really the work ethic and kindness, and genuine, authentic relationships is, like, you can talk about networking until you're blue in the face, but ultimately it all just comes down to having genuine relationships with people and not having like transactional relationships, and that is part of being a good person, being interested in what the other people have going on in their lives, besides just that, the transaction you're trying to get out
Yeah,
of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
for sure.
And just being kind. Give before you ask.
Very nice. I like that. All right. So where can everybody stay up to date with stuff going on with you guys?
Well, the podcast you can find all over on the interwebs, all over the place. You can find it at Care Select Pod, CHAR Select Pod, on YouTube and on Instagram, and then there are variations on that for TikTok and Twitter. So if you just look up Character Select Podcast, it'll pop up. And then you can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Spotify. Like I said, YouTube, and then Julia's handles.
Julia BS Casting on all the things.
And I am Sweet Anj with 3 E's, so SWEEETANJ on all the things as well.
Very cool. And to keep up with this interview, lots of other nerdy news and interviews, check out our website, geek-network.com. You can find us on Facebook at Geek Network. We're at GeeksAZ on Twitter and Instagram. This show is at Fueled by Weird on Instagram, so hit me up there. Hit me up at an email at fueledbyweird@gmail.com if you want to chat about all sorts of stuff. The music for the show is by Polygon Horizon. Go check them out on Bandcamp. They're a great band. And Chris Chandler and Mike Belcher do the logos for the show. Go check them out. They're a couple of good friends of mine. And make sure you definitely check out Character Select on YouTube. It's a great podcast. If you're especially you're into video games, or even if you're not and you want to go check out a great show, go check out Character Select. It is an awesome show. And if you like this show, please leave a review and tell your friends, because word of mouth is our friend. And remember, kids, to embrace the things that fuel your weird and always geek responsibly. Julia, Anjali, thanks so much for coming to chat with me today.
Thank you.
This was lovely.